welcome back to another episode of Parenting Shrink Wrapped. Sam here with Melissa, and our special guest today is Angie Weber. And I'm actually really excited about this conversation because Angie, like me, is a parenting coach. However, her bag is ages like 3 to 13 or 4 to 13, and 13 or maybe a little bit younger is where I pick up. So between the two of us, we've got the whole spectrum of age, parenting age groups covered. But I'm really excited for this conversation to kind of hear how your approach dovetails with the work I do with parents of adolescents. So, and I know that our audience is going to be excited. You've got some neat frameworks as well as products too. So Angie's the owner of the Parent Toolbox and the developer of the Calm approach to parenting, CALM. And I know you're going to tell us a little more about that. And the creator of the CALM Calm Family Planner. And she hosts her own podcast called Mom Essentials. And she is on a mission to break generational parenting cycles. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. So if you are listening and you're like, you know what, I know what I don't want to do. Or I experienced something as a child and I don't want my child to experience the same thing. Or my parents brought their own baggage into their mothering or their fathering, and I'd like to unpack it and leave it where it belongs. This is the episode for you. So Angie helps parents upgrade their own toolboxes with strategies and approaches to create more communication, connection, and of course, calm in their homes. And we're going to integrate that conversation with a conversation around, making these generational parenting shifts. So Angie Weber, welcome to Parenting Shrink Wrapped.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to talk with you ladies.
So are we. Before we get going, can you tell us the story of how the Parent Toolbox came to be?
Yeah, so I actually started my career out in marketing. During that 7 years that I helped run a marketing company, I went through a lot of life changes, including getting married and becoming a mom. I had twins when I was 26, so a boy and girl. And I really loved being a mom, always wanted to be a mom, but my career was definitely at the forefront of everything. And so around when they were about 3 years old, it kind of all came to a head. And I realized that my priorities for me personally were just very messed up, and I was focusing way too much on my professional life, and I felt like I had really missed out on the first couple of years of my kids' lives. So I made the decision to quit my job, and luckily I had already kind of started growing a business on the side, which I wasn't intending to be a business, but it was still helping families with more proactive approaches to their health through natural products, essential oils, things like that. So it was a great time around 2018 when I quit and was able to flourish in that. And then a couple years later, I went through some trauma in my life right before the pandemic hit. So 2020 was quite the year here in my household. But it also sent me on this huge healing journey. And I took courses and started understanding more about mental health, our emotions. And I started really unpacking a few things, those generational cycles that I had taken on from my own upbringing. And I could see that I was passing on to my kids, and I knew I wanted to make a change. So as I started implementing some new tools and strategies and concepts, I saw this really cool ripple effect happen with me and my kids, me and my husband and my kids. Like, all of our relationships were changing for the better. And so I started incorporating that into my holistic practice. And after I did a class called the Parent Toolbox, so many moms afterwards were like, wait a minute, why didn't I know this before? Or why are we not out there teaching our kids this? So that's really when I decided to kind of shift gears a little bit, rebrand to the Parent Toolbox. And that's where the whole Calm approach developed. And again, my mission to break those generational cycles, because that's really what I hear from clients most of the time is they say, I just don't want to parent how I was parented, and utilizing really practical tools that parents can start implementing right away so that they can feel like there's progress happening within their home.
Angie, can you kind of briefly give us an overview of what the Calm approach is?
Yeah. So I am definitely someone who doesn't feel like there is a one size fits all to parenting approaches. Again, having twins, I know that I need much different tools for my daughter especially as we're going into the preteen years, than I do for my son, even when I want the same outcome. And so I think parents get really overwhelmed with like, well, what's the best parenting style out there? And what if I don't follow it? Like, absolutely to the T. And so when I developed the CALM approach, I really wanted to make it clear that this is tailored to each specific family based on their goals, needs, and wants. And so the CALM approach are 4 foundational pieces that I teach parents, and then we tailor it again to who they are, who their children are, and what their goals are. So every letter stands for a different foundational piece. C is compassionate communication. So we talk a lot, obviously, about different ways to communicate, help versus herd, for example, and really ways that we can connect more with our children to really create that great bond with them that can hopefully last as they move into their adult years. A is for awareness and accountability. So this is where I tell parents it's time to get curious with our parenting. We live in such a reactive society that I love to teach parents, like, let's actually take a step back so we can be proactive and see what the real issues are that are happening. And then with the accountability piece, we talk a lot about discipline, not punishment, and consequences, natural and enforced, and also that repair piece of teaching our children how to repair situations if they're wrong or if another person's wrong. L is learning emotional regulation, and that's probably my favorite piece of it because a lot of us grew up hearing things like, don't be angry. Why are you upset? It's not a big deal. And so we really stopped listening to the cues that emotions were giving us in our bodies. So I love working specifically with the parents because we usually have a lot harder time re-understanding that stuff and getting in tune. And I think it's really important that we practice it first as adults so that our kids can see it, because the last piece of this is mindful modeling, because our kids are watching us all of the time. So we talk a lot about safe and healthy coping skills versus survival coping skills, and just really the behavior that we're demonstrating for our children.
Awesome. I mean, like, I feel like what you've just outlined, if every family had that toolbox, pun intended, or word choice intended, like our children everywhere would be in better shape.
And Sam, I hear a lot of overlap in a lot of principles I know you use, even with teens. Like a lot of what you said, Angie, rings true in knowing Sam's parenting work as well.
Yeah, it's just good stuff. Like, you obviously you tailor what works because it's research based. It's not. You're not winging it. Like what you just described is, there's so much research to back up that these are the foundational components. You can package them slightly differently, but like this stuff works absolutely. And like you said, how you implement it. You've got same age twins, so one kid calls for a different approach than the other. But I think also how you implement it as your children age. That varies too, but the North Star remains the same.
Yeah. Well, Angie, I love what you said about how a lot of us that are now raising kids of our own, we're kind of told, like, just don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, stuff like that. And I'm assuming that's where a lot of your work with generational differences kind of comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for my own personal experience, when I went through a hard part of life and this kind of led on my healing journey, I started discovering that, again, I was taking a lot of stuff that I saw from my parents. And so when something bad happened, I would get into fix it mode. I didn't want to deal with my emotions because they were uncomfortable. I just wanted to have the ABC plan of like, this is how I'm going to get through it. These are the check boxes to mark off. And I'm just going to get into fix it mode right away. And again, what happened is that I just suppressed all of my emotions. So then sometimes they would come out of nowhere when I was least expecting it. And I always do preface too, when I work with parents, that we are not trying to shame our parents because they did the best with what they had at the time. But again, just like we have those generational cycles that are handed down from one generation to another, I think we can all agree on this call too that parenting is just so different now. I mean, we have so many other things that we have to worry about, especially with technology and screens and the way of the world. And so it really gives us the opportunity to upgrade our parenting toolboxes. And again, when I started unpacking and realizing, like, I'll be honest, I had a great childhood. My parents have been married for 45 years. Like, they're lovely people. They're very supportive. And I can also look back and be like, oh, yeah, we didn't talk about emotions. So when those feelings came up, I didn't know what to do with them, even in my 30s. And I had to really suppress them and realize that I was probably going to more survival coping skills than healthy coping skills because, again, I just didn't know what to do with it. And so understanding how to do that for myself first, I then saw how it was really helping my kids express themselves as well. And just, again, this ripple effect, because we're not only upgrading our parenting toolboxes, we're giving our children their own little mini toolboxes that they're going to be able to grow as they continue to get older into the teen years and into adulthood. And hopefully will not have to do as much work when they're in their 30s to upgrade their tools.
I cannot agree with you more. Like the theory of attachment, which is how we connect to our caregivers when we're infants, but we also know that it's how we connect to people in general. The quality or the nature, I shouldn't say quality, but the nature of the way we are in connection with our caregivers influences us on a prelingual nervous system level. And we take that into in a subconscious way into future relationships. Put on top of that communication patterns or lack thereof, depending on, like you're talking about, oh, we didn't talk about emotions, but maybe like you went right to the business of the matter and like got stuff done in your household, right? Like that. So that's what feels like home. This stuff gets really ingrained in us in a way that there isn't language for. It just feels right. And so why would you look for something different if this is what feels like home in my body, right? Until you get into a significant relationship of your own, a romantic relationship, a partnership, or parenthood, where there's so much love and the connection matters so much to you, and you realize, gosh, I may not have this all figured out. Like what I brought into this may not be suiting me or the other person in this connection. So first of all, kudos to you for having the courage to do that work. I don't know if that was something that you're like, I'm going to do this, or if life just threw you into it and you're like, I don't really have a choice, damn it. Right. But kudos to you for deciding that you were going to come out of it a better person, or a more equipped mom. When we talk about generational change, like you described one example in your own family, but what are some other things? Like what are some in clients you've worked with or in your research or studies? If X is happening in your life or relationship, how might that be a marker of a generational like suitcase that you carry down, like baggage you're carrying?
Yeah. So again, mine was a lot with like talking about emotions and being able to express them in more safe, healthy ways. And when I work with clients to examples kind of stick out. Again, it's one of my clients who said, I don't want to parent how I was parented, because she was very much parented with the thought of children should be seen and not heard. And so she felt like she didn't really have a voice when she was younger, and she wanted to make sure that her children had a voice. And her and her husband had very similar kind of upbringing. So he had some of those same feelings of it. It's interesting because most of the time when it comes to the male figure, the dad in the parenting situation, their biggest thing is that they want respect. And so I always kind of try to ask, like, well, what does that mean to you though? Like, what did you see as respect growing up? And what does that mean moving in with, into your parenting with your children? But again, I would say both of them were on the agreement of like, we were always to be seen and not heard. I feel like I couldn't fully express myself, or they felt very judged in the way that their parents communicated with them. And they really wanted to create that safe environment for their children in order to be able to have those deep conversations and to come to them whenever, they needed. Another client of mine, it was a lot on the discipline stuff. She was actually a co-parent, and it was part of their new custody agreement that each of them had to get a parenting coach. So I really enjoy working with co-parents because they have two different situations that they're looking at. One is, how do I become the parent I want to be when I only have my kids part of the time? And the other situation is, how do I deal with this relationship that is no longer romantic? At this time, they had been divorced for years, both remarried. But how do I navigate that relationship when we do not see eye to eye on a lot of stuff? And so for her, she actually had two kind of different generations of kids. She had some older kids. One was out of the house. And then the younger two from the marriage that she had separated from, she really wanted to create better bonds with them. And she knew that yelling and how she was disciplining was not something that she wanted to continue on because of the relationship with her older children that she saw. She saw the strains in it. So those are kind of two examples. And of course, again, we tailor the calm approach to them so that it feels like very practical, implemental types of strategies that they can just do baby steps. That's the other thing that I tell parents all the time. I'm like, it has taken us a lot of little steps to get to where we are. It is going to take us a lot of little steps to get us to where we want to be.
Absolutely, yes. When you were talking about the co-parenting situation, well, actually also the parenting situation where there's two very different styles, whether it's co-parenting or in a relationship. I often find that particularly if you grew up in an authoritarian household where it was children are seen and not heard, or do as I say because I said so, right? The parent has more power, and parents should have more power, even in an authoritative household. But does it have to be power over, or can it be power with, right? That's the mission. I find that when one of the growing pains for families like this, and tell me if you see this in your practice with younger kids, is when a parent realizes, okay, this authoritarian approach, this like yelling, trying to regulate my kids by putting tighter and tighter guardrails or being scarier and scarier with them. When you're like, okay, I'm going to do it a different way, it gets messy in the household because doing it a different way means that the child has a say, potentially. The child's voice matters more in the negotiation. Like, it's not as crisp a solution. Moments become just like the areas of the edges of moments become blurrier, I think, instead of crisp. And that can be very challenging, anxiety provoking, agitating as parents are adopting this new strategy. Like, in other words, making a generational shift is not just a choice that you make and suddenly you just like are on this steady uphill climb. Like, do you find that there's mess in the middle before you come out of the mess?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say too, like, everyone has messy. Messy just looks different for everyone. And so yes, when you start doing this work, it might work really well the first time. And then you're like, this is awesome. I can't wait to keep doing this. And then the next time you're like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not on board with this. Like, they're children, they're their own tiny little humans, and they have their own thoughts, and they do want their voices to be heard. And so, again, one of the reasons I love working directly with the parents, and I don't work necessarily with the whole family. I'm not super nanny. I don't go in and watch their family and say, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did right, is because we have to do a lot of the hard work ourselves.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to the learning emotional regulation. And so it's going to be messy. And, when you were talking before of like, oh, it's so great that you went through this transformation and learned all this stuff. I mean, I'm so thankful for it. And I'm not going to lie, there are some days that I'm like feeling all the feels, going through all the steps, expressing it in healthy, safe ways. Like, it is draining and it is tiring some days. Yes. And so again, I think the more that we can really focus in on creating the calm in our house by utilizing the tools, because emotions are contagious, the better off we're going to be with seeing that change, but knowing it's not going to be a one and done. It is something that you have to work on. But I will say my clients who come to me, they're ready to do the work. They know that they want something different in their families and with their bonds with their kids. So they're willing to put in the work, which is great. And, they know that it's going to be a bumpy ride sometimes, especially because kids go through different changes, right? We think we have it figured out when they're babies. And then all of a sudden they're like, you guys just slept through the night. Why are you not sleeping through the night all of a sudden? Or you have a great bond with your kids. And then they go to preteen years, because my daughter is 11 going on 16. And the emotions around here are wide. So
Yes.
it changes.
I think also too, kind of being able to express to parents to kind of give themselves some grace, because it's not going to go perfectly every time. And I think sometimes when parents have the support that you provide, Angie, and the same support that Sam can provide, like, there's that reassurance that, like, yeah, okay, we messed up, but we can also still repair, is really important. And that, like, none of us are getting it right all the time, every time. And I think, like, having that kind of, background noise always present for a parent is really important, because, yeah, the preteen is going to throw you for a loop one day and basically be kind one second and a totally different person the next. Because I have one at home.
And I was thinking also, I was talking with a set of parents who were complaining about their kids seeming kind of like, just their kids were a little entitled, is what they felt. And I remember saying, and they were like, when I was younger, like, I had to work, I had to do all this, I had a job and I hustled. And I said, well, in your household, are you providing more for your children than you were provided? Like, have you done better than your parents, essentially? And these parents both said, yes, we have. And I said, this is the trade-off. Like, you can't have both. You can't have a kid who's scrapping to make their own money if there isn't that scarcity, right? And again, that's just sort of this mess that we have to. And I share that because I think we can talk about undoing generational trauma, and we ought to, and we need to. And we can't expect that we are going to be the last in the line, like that our children are going to move forward without, being screwed up. I said to my daughter on her way I was at college, this was last September, August, and somehow we were talking about therapy or like growing up stuff, and I turned to her and I said, hey, listen, when you're 30 and you're in therapy talking about me, I just want you to know, whatever you're talking about, I didn't mean to. It's not my intention. I'm just going to put it out there right there. We both laughed, but because I just know, like, I've not, even with the knowledge that we have, like, there's just no way to do this perfectly.
Absolutely. And I always say it's about empowerment over perfection, and remind parents that, honestly, at the end of the day, our kids don't want perfect parents. They just want us. We can get so caught up in the shame cycle and the guilt of, oh my gosh, we raised our voice. Or, I see Susie down the street who has the perfect family photo and my kids don't have matched socks, like comparison crap. And again, the truth is that our kids want the stability and they want space to be held inside of our homes for them. That's more important than being the quote unquote perfect parent, because it's not attainable either. I mean, we would drive ourselves crazy trying to be the perfect parent. And we also joke with our kids when they, say something that they don't like. And I said, well, I hope you keep this in your journal for therapy in 20 years,
Yeah.
It might happen, and that's cool. Like, again, I'm doing the best with what I can do with the tools that I have, and they're probably going to grow up and want to make some changes too with their own families.
And Angie, I think you bring up a good point that, like, we talk a lot about our kids kind of and the influence of technology on our kids. It's the same thing for parents. Like, you have to be careful not to get swept up in this comparison culture of what is posted on social media, and somebody posting some perfect family photo, or, my kid scored the winning goal and all of that. Like, there is a choice in what is posted on social media that does not necessarily reflect actual reality. And I think it's important for parents sometimes too to kind of step back from some of that social media influence that can influence adults, not just our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge thing, right? Because we see the highlight reels. We don't see the fight that happened of them getting all in their matching outfits or out, right? We see the perfect picture. And so I think there's kind of two caveats to this of, yes, we cannot compare our real life to the highlight reels that we see on social media. And we also have the opportunity to really model proper and safe, like healthy relationships with technology with our kids by what we're looking at, what they see, how they see us using technology, and the comments that we're making too about it. If they hear us be like, oh, Susie has a perfect family, why can't we be like this? It's not going to be a positive experience for the kids either. And so that's something I know a lot of moms struggle with, is that we have this constant fear of like, am I doing enough? Am I enough? And so kind of shutting out that noise and being able to just really focus on your family, your nuclear family in the house, is going to be more important than how many likes you got on your kids, first birthday photo.
I was thinking about also, it's funny that what you just said about moms feeling like, am I enough? I was doing some research on linguistics and the difference between how genders express themselves. And this is a while back, and I can't even remember. I can't attribute what I'm going to say to anyone in particular, but I know it's to somebody. And there's a pattern in women, and it starts in young women, of self-deprecation as a means of connecting. Like, oh, I'm so ugly. Pause. Oh, this outfit looks horrible on me. Pause. Because it's a way to, and then the other women in the group, or young women, kids, girls, jump in and say, no, you're so beautiful, or this is, and I was recently, I had the experience last weekend of visiting my son at his parents' weekend, and I was hanging with some other parents, and I overheard this in like adult women talking about how ill-equipped they were for like playing pool, for example. We were at a a bar. I suck at this. I'm so bad at this. As they're playing, right? And I was like, don't talk like that about yourself, right? So I bring this up because we're talking about generational changes, but I think there's also not just generational changes, but like societal changes. Sometimes we bring stuff into the parenting realm that we don't, it's our mom and dad didn't give this to us necessarily. It's just something that we picked up on how we communicate or how we draw our sense of self-worth or don't. And like you said, it's worth pausing and getting curious about. So here's my big, long question. It's my lead up. How? What are tools or steps that you suggest to parents for zooming out and getting curious?
Yeah, so doing just that, I tell people to, take like a week, for example, especially if it's a behavior that the kids are doing. Our kids are telling us what they need through their actions and through their behaviors. We just don't necessarily listen all the time. And so I tell them, hey, take a step back. I have a page in my workbook, but otherwise they can just use a notebook and just jot down what's happening. Let's say that they're having a really hard time, at certain parts of the day. Maybe it's right after they come home from school. Because I know that's a concern for a lot of parents. They're like, I hear that my kid is perfect at school all the time, and then they come home and they're running all over. They're jumping on the couch, they're just going wild. Like, why is it that they're acting like this? So I say, take a step back and just make observation notes without judgment, any of that. Just say, what's going on? What time of day is it? Is there any other, factors in there, people, places, things? And then also say, like, how am I feeling about this? What are my emotions during this time? And then after we have about a week of observations, go back and say, oh, okay, you know what? Actually, they are just decompressing when they come home. And maybe I'm throwing a bunch of stuff. Maybe I'm, they walk through the door and I say, you need to do A, B, and C and D as your chores. And they're already overstimulated. And now that's just overstimulating them more. And so we can take a different approach when we find the root cause. Now, if it's for adults, if it's for parents, moms, for example, I always encourage them to, again, take notes. What are some of those negative thoughts that they're having in their head? And again, just jot them down without any thoughts, any judgment in it. and then go back to it and say, well, what's some evidence that I can find to disprove this? Maybe I just don't do enough as a mom. And the evidence to disprove it is actually I do quite a bit. I do the grocery shopping. I create a safe environment for my home. I'm the one who picks them up and drops them off at school. And so we can start kind of going back to that evidence base when we're feeling down. So we can start rewiring those thoughts in our brain and have a more positive outlook on it.
I love that. Thank you for the concrete examples too. Really.
Absolutely.
So, Angie, if our listeners are relating to this, and I have a feeling all of us do, how can they find you? How can they learn more about your approach with CALM and your parenting toolbox? Where can we find you? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can find me at theparenttoolbox.info. Online, that's my website. All the stuff is on there, contact. And then also on social media on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, I'm at the Parent Toolbox.
Awesome. And we will have all those links in the show notes for any of our listeners. Angie, any last thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, thank you both of you ladies for having me on and being able to share. I get so excited about sharing the CALM approach with everyone, not just because it can really affect your parenting, but I've given this presentation or presentations about the CALM approach to women business groups and to mental health providers, obviously to parenting. And I always hear the same thing. I see how this can actually be applied to the other relationships and situations in my life. So I think if you're going to start implementing it, don't get overwhelmed. And again, as you mentioned before, have that grace for yourself, knowing that it's going to take some time. And if you feel like it's hard work, it's because it is. And it also means that you're willing to make the change. And that right there is what a great parent does.
I love that. So, Angie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us today. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We love you. We love your kids. Thank you for raising the next generation of world changers.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride called parenthood here at Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We hope today's episode gave you some useful tools and maybe even a few laughs to help you navigate the twists and turns of raising teens and kids.
Remember, parenting is a journey, not a destination. And no matter where you are on the road, we're here to help you stay on course. Whether it's monumental meltdowns, teenage turmoil, or just the everyday chaos, you don't have to travel this path alone.
So until next time, keep your seatbelt fastened, your sense of humor intact, and your eyes on the road. We'll be back soon with more compassionate conversations and practical strategies to support you and your family.
Don't forget to subscribe to Parenting Shrink Wrapped wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you've enjoyed today's show, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review and share it with a friend.
If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see us cover in the future, feel free to send us an email at parentingshrinkwrapped@gmail.com.
Until we meet again, take care and enjoy the ride.